Hi, I'm Laura Nelkin. I'm a knitwear designer. I live in upstate New York in the Finger Lakes region. And this short tutorial teaches you tips and tricks for knitting low lanyard. Low lanyard is a lanyard designed by my somewhat spicy alter ego, Lola. She insisted that it be called low lanyard, so we just stuck with that. You can knit low lanyard as a badge or scissor holder, or you can knit it as an eyeglass fob, and I will show you how to do both of those connections. Low lanyard uses pre-strung beads. I'll go over the materials for working low lanyard, the cast-ons, how to work with the beads, and then you will be off and running. You do need to own either the pattern or a kit to follow along with this tutorial. It won't make sense unless you have those. And of course, I would love if you would subscribe to my channel, sign up for my mailing list, keep up with whatever I am going to do next, and especially what my alter ego Lola is going to do next. I'll give you links to everything below. All right, if we look under the camera, I have all the materials together that you are going to need to knit low lanyard. First up, you'll need about 25 yards of lace weight yarn. This is a 50% merino, 50% lyocell or tencel yarn that is really lovely for working with beads. The beads, speaking of beads, you'll want to use size 8 Japanese seed beads. These beads I'm using right here are Matsuno beads. They have a square hole with a silver lining. You'll also need something to string your beads onto your yarn. I like to use a dental floss threader. And then you will need either 2 eyeglass fobs for attaching your eyeglasses to your lanyard, or a lobster swivel clasp if you're going to use your low lanyard for your scissors or a badge or something like that. I don't know, the next time you go to a concert, you might need a beaded lanyard to hang your badge on, right? So the other things that you'll need are an approximately 2 millimeter crochet hook. Don't worry if your crochet hook is a little bit bigger or smaller than that. You just need a small crochet hook. And then you'll need approximately US size 1 needles. If you knit loosely, you might go down a needle size. And if you knit tightly, you might go up a needle size. So that is just a suggestion for your needles. So once you've gathered all of that, you can certainly get a kit from me, which will have everything but the needles and the crochet hook in it. You can get started stringing on your beads. So let's do that next. Okay, the first thing that you need to do for low lanyard is string on your beads, because you are working with beads that are pre-strung on your yarn. So what you'll do is take your dental floss threader or a large eye beading needle and put your yarn through the hole in the dental floss threader, giving yourself a nice long tail. And then you can just take the tip of that dental floss threader, pick up some beads, get them onto the dental floss threader, and then slide them down onto your yarn. You want to make sure to push them down your yarn a little bit, because you'll be working the cast on without beads before you start to work with the beads. I do have a separate longer video on stringing on beads, so if that is a new technique for you, I will link it for you below. Once you have those beads strung on, the next thing we get to do is cast on, and I'm going to start that with the eyeglass fob. Okay, to cast on for the eyeglass fob, I am going to start with the crochet hook. And the first thing that I want to do is make a slip knot, and then take that slip knot and put it onto the crochet hook. You're gonna want to put it on there, but not too tightly. I find the mistake that I make when I'm doing this cast on is I end up working it a little too tight, and then it's really hard to get into the stitches with my knitting needle. So once I have the slip knot on my crochet hook, I'm going to hold the crochet hook in my right hand and then the end of the eyeglass fob in my left hand. So what I'm going to do is reach inside the fob, grab my working yarn and pull it through, and then I'm going to make another yarn over onto the hook, and then I'm going to pull that yarn over through both those loops. And now I've got one chain on my fob. So then I'm going to go inside again. I'm going to grab my yarn. I'm going to make a yarn over. I'm going to pull that through. And remember, I said the trick here is to not work this too tightly. Otherwise, it's going to be really hard to work into when you need to pick up stitches. And now we're going to do that one more time. Grab the yarn, wrap the yarn around, and pull it through. And that is the number of stitches that I need on the fob. So now I'm going to turn my work, and I'm going to actually kind of put the crochet hook back in there. You can do this next step with your knitting needle, but I actually find it much easier to get all of the stitches onto your crochet hook and then transfer them to your knitting needle. So what I'm going to do now is pick up one stitch in each chain going along that fob. So I'm going to go right there. I'm going to grab my yarn, put it onto my hook. I'm going to go underneath the next chain, grab my yarn, put it onto my hook, and I am going to go underneath the last chain, grab my yarn, and put it on my hook. I feel like it's important for me to remind you to breathe because I just didn't breathe while I was doing that. And now what I like to do for this step, and you'll see that it works really well, is I just turn my hook down and I'm pinching really, really hard right there. And then I can just kind of pull my hook out, and all of my stitches are staying so nice and tidy right there. And then I can just put my knitting needle in, and I've got my stitches all cast on and ready to start knitting. So I'm going to turn my work. The biggest mistake you can make right now, everybody, is to start working with your tail instead of with your working yarn. So make sure that you don't do that. Now that I've picked up all those stitches and I'm ready to go, the next thing I'm going to do is knit 4. So I'm going to go in and knit 1, and I'm going to go in and knit 2, 3, and 4. Okay, now we're going to work setup row 2, which is a purl 2, yarn over, purl 2. We're going to actually end up dropping that yarn over. What that yarn over does is just give us a little bit of room for the beads to settle in nicely on the strand. So now we've got 5 stitches on our needles, but just for that row, and we're about to lose one on this next row. So now we're on row 1, and we're going to knit 1, and we're going to purl 1, and now we're going to drop that yarn over, and now I'm going to go down my yarn, and I'm going to grab a bead, and I'm going to slide that bead right up right there, and then I'm going to purl 1 and knit 1. And now I'm going to turn my work so I have the wrong side facing, and I'm going to slip 1 purlwise with yarn in front, and then I am going to knit 1, and then I'm going to bring up a bead, and let me just get that tail out of there so it's not confusing you. And now I'm going to knit 1, and I am going to slip 1 purlwise with yarn in front. And now I'm going to work those same rows once more, but I don't have a yarn over to drop anymore. So I'm going to knit 1, purl 1. Isn't it easy working with beads? I just go and grab that bead, slide it up, and then I'm going to purl 1 and knit 1. And then the next row, I'll be slipping 1, knitting 1, slipping up a bead. So as you work this, the rows are exactly the same, but on the next row, I'm going to start slipping up 2 beads, and for the rest of the chain, I will have 2 beads in between my stitches. Let me just show you that with row 5. So I'm going to knit 1, purl 1. Just 4 stitches of knitting, so easy. And now I'm going to go down, grab 2 beads and slide those 2 beads up, and then purl 1, knit 1. And then you'll continue following the pattern until the first half of your low lanyard is complete. It is really easy to make your low lanyard longer or shorter by stringing on more or less beads and working less rows of the repeats of rows 5 and 6 as you're slipping up the 2 beads. So once you finish the first half of your eyeglass fob, you're going to set that aside, put it on some scrap yarn or a stitch marker, and then work a second half, and then you'll graft those 2 halves together, and I'll give you a link to grafting if you've never grafted before. It is very easy to graft. If you are somebody who does not love to graft, you can always work a 3 needle bind off. Nobody's going to see that at the back of your neck. So go ahead and work whichever graft brings you more joy. Basically, that's what you get to do when you are done with your eyeglass fob. I do want to show you a little bit of a difference on how you work the lanyard connection and then splitting those stitches for working the 2 sides. So let's go ahead and look at that next. Okay, let's quickly talk about the lanyard connection because it's a little bit different than the eyeglasses, and I want to make sure you don't get caught up in that. If you look under the camera, you can see a finished low lanyard right here. And this finished low lanyard, you'll see it's a little bit sparkly. And what I did with that is carry some really fine metallic thread along with my lace weight yarn. I do have that metallic thread in my shop. If you want to incorporate that in any of your knitting, it's a really fun way to add just like a little bit of sparkle or flare. But when you look down at the bottom right here, you can see that I've cast on more stitches than we cast on for the eyeglass fob. And you work 3 rows, and then on the 4th row, you actually split the strands and work 1 half of the strand. And then when you're done working that, you come back to held stitches and work the other. So you'll follow your pattern as written. You'll notice when you go to do the pickup that you have 7 stitches on your needles, and you'll be increasing 1 stitch to get 8 stitches on your needles in that first row. And then in the next row, you'll be doing the same technique where you make a yarn over to make room for the beads and then drop that yarn over on the next row. So there's really nothing new to show you with your knitting. I just think it's important to understand what is happening with the low lanyard and those extra stitches versus the eyeglass fob. This is really easy knitting. I think the things that are hard about low lanyard are really the small yarn and small needles. So if you watch this and you're trying and you're getting challenged and you're frustrated, go ahead and grab some bigger yarn and bigger needles, even some bigger beads to try this. You could try it with size 6 beads and like some fingering weight yarn. That would make a really great low lanyard. You could also, if you just need to practice, grab like worsted weight yarn and some like pony beads that you have left over from like your 4-H days or some, those big beads you get at the craft store. Just something to help you play and understand what's happening with the yarn and beads on your needles before you come back and use the small yarn and small needles. Of course, I would love for you to ask any questions that you have. I am really excited to see your low lanyards come off of your needles. I would love if you could send me photos of you like in situ using them and wearing them. I hadn't thought of when I first designed this that I could use it for scissors when I'm working. I did find with these scissors, they're just very sharp. I ended up putting a needle end stopper that's like little sushi shaped on there, so I wasn't poking my hand knits when I wear it. You can use it, for badges, glasses, what have you. Have fun and ask questions and subscribe to my channel and all that jazz. I really love knitting with you. I adore designing. I adore teaching, and you all make it possible for me to do that. So thank you. Happy knitting.
Yes.